Welcome everybody to the Brand Sisters. I'm Claire.
And I'm Alexis.
And today we're going to be chatting, we're going to be tackling one of my favorite topics, which is color. I love color and choosing color palettes for brands. So we're going to talk about how to effectively choose a color palette, and then also to avoid two common mistakes that people often make and that I see all the time with clients.
I can't wait to hear those. Yes. I think this is such a good topic because color is so important, right? And then don't you feel like a lot of times people pick something and then they're consistently changing it too, because maybe they never really knew how to pick the right colors in the first place?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
It's kind of I think people feel like color's an afterthought, but the truth is that color communicates, right? Color has power, and it affects how your potential clients and visitors to your site and social media and all that, how they view you, right? How they see you and take you in. Because as we know, when it comes to businesses, it's not like you're coming to someone and meeting someone in person necessarily sometimes, but for the most part, you have to use everything that you can in order to communicate who you are as a brand. So color is a huge part of that. So for color palette, it's important to make sure you're keeping in mind, your brand and how to encompass that with your colors, but also how your client might want to, or how they potentially could be taking you in.
So you're saying it's not just about choosing colors you like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Which
That's
is like usually the,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's usually kind of a, whenever we have clients come on, and the first step is always to figure out like what's the creative direction for your brand, right? And a huge part of that is color palette. So that is the number one mistake that I see, is that clients always want to choose their favorite colors, right? Like they want to choose like, oh, I love, I had a wellness brand recently that wanted to do black and red. And I was like, black and red doesn't really evoke, clean and natural and wellness and, holistic. That's not really, those aren't the colors that evoke that, right? So we moved into a direction of more neutral tones, more greens. So you have to keep in mind that the brand's not just about you, right? And I think that that's something that we commonly, have issues with, that we feel like our brand is all about us and what we like, what we want, what resonates with us. And that black and red probably was significant for that person, right? But it's not going to resonate with their potential client.
Right.
So that's the number one mistake, is making sure that you're not just choosing your favorite colors. The second big mistake is choosing too many colors. Oftentimes clients have a hard time choosing, right? When we bring clients on and we do color palettes for them, we obviously choose that for them. But oftentimes clients have ideas of what they want, right? And you might have like a red tone and a green tone and a blue tone, and you have all of these different colors that come into play, and then there's no synergy, right? There's no cohesiveness. And as we've talked about before, right, every opportunity you have to have your brand be visible, right, be seen by somebody, it needs to be consistent. You need to be saying the same message, and that goes for visually as well. So number one mistake to avoid is choosing colors that are just your favorite, right? Not thinking about your client. And then the second is to make sure that you're not just, picking all these colors that you think are all really cool, right? And not really think about how they can come together cohesively.
Do you think that people do that because they get like FOMO almost? Like, I don't want to leave something out. Yes. Or like, what if I would want to do something and I do like this color, or feel like they need it to be interesting? Because especially for clients that want a vibrant, bold look, I feel like some of those clients want a large array. So how do you balance that kind of client that may want something like bold and vibrant?
That's such a good...
Because neutrals, I feel like, that's like, I don't want to say easier, but if you want neutrals, of course, like there's so many various shades of neutrals, but it's a little bit easier. Yeah,
bold colors are really... if you're going to go for bold colors, like there's this one brand, Lucy Fink. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she does really cool videos on social media. But she she just got rebranded by a designer, Brighton Maid, who I love. She's awesome. And she did an excellent job with the whole bright color palette, right? Like she has like pinks and reds and oranges, you know, all these really bright colors, but they all look cohesive because they're all along the same lines when it comes to like same tones, right? Another issue that we come in contact with clients is you can't really pair like a muted tone with a really like vibrant one, right? Like you have to almost, if you have like a pastel, you can't have like a primary blue, right? And
that's interesting because I remember we've heard that from clients. They want to pop, right? But they don't know how to do that themselves, right? It looks off.
Which is a great way for us to segue into how to choose your color palette. So there's 5 more or less colors. That can kind of be a go-to amount. I feel like when it comes to design, you know, like our mom used to always tell me, I remember when we got a new apartment at one point after we got married, I remember being like, Mom, how the heck do I like decorate this place? You know, like had never done this before. And she was like, one rule, because she was a designer for those, you know, listening.
An interior designer.
One of the biggest rules is that you always work in odd numbers, right? So like if you're getting together your like side table or whatever, like you would put 3 things on there instead of like 2 or 4, right? Or 5 or whatever. So that's always like a I don't know if it's I don't know, there's probably something to it, some wisdom behind that. But so when it comes to color palette, choose an odd number, like 5, or if you want to keep it really simple and bold, 3, you know. But I wouldn't choose any more than that unless you're doing tones. But I think if someone's doing it on their own, 5's a good amount. And the first thing to do is to choose an accent color. Okay. And that's usually the color that you would use for a call to action, for a link. And you would use it sparingly. I think that's like where people get it wrong. Like an accent color is not something you want to just like throw everywhere as a background color. That's usually not the purpose, right? So the accent color is designed to make things stand out.
So is it one of your more bold colors?
It should be. Yes, it should be your most bold color.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a brand as an example. So a jewelry brand that wanted to have they didn't want to be all like luxurious and bougie. They wanted to be a little more subtle and sophisticated. And so for her, we chose like a gold color. And it wasn't a shimmery gold, right? It was a matte gold. So that meant that like the rest of the colors we chose needed to be matte, right? Like none of them could be shimmery and, you know, luxurious, because then it would clash and it wouldn't look similar. So we chose the matte gold. And then the second step for color palette is a complementary color to that. Accent color. So that complementary color for her was like a mauve color. So it's kind of like a deeper tone. And that we would use more than the accent color, but still not everywhere. And it would be more for like smaller design elements, maybe the background of a strip on her website, or like a block would be that color, but it would still be used a little bit sparingly, but not as sparing as the accent. And then once you've established those 2 colors, you need a neutral tone. So you don't want to have like all these va-va-boom colors, you know, because then it's going to, unless you have a designer working with you and they can do that well. But so you have those 2 colors, and then you need a neutral tone. So for her, we did like a blush pink because we wanted to complement the others, but not be too and not attract too much attention. You want something that like can be in the background and just give everything balance.
And is that neutral tone the one that you're probably predominantly going to use?
Yes.
And is it like for larger spaces? It's not for accents, right? It'd be more. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that might be like the background of your website.
So you need to love that color.
Yes.
I mean, you should obviously love all your colors.
Totally.
That color really is going to be used prominently.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And you might use that on the back of your like stories or, so that would be used a lot. And then the last part, which I think gets often overlooked, but is super important, is you need a dark and a light. So you need a dark color for text primarily, right? Because you need that to stand out. And oftentimes, like the go-to is like black and white, right? Like you're dark and you're light, but I always encourage, or I don't encourage them, I show them like, let's go beyond that a little bit, right? Like instead, so for this client, it wasn't necessarily black, it was more of like a charcoal with a little bit of like a blue tone to it. And then for the light, it was like an off-white, right? So we're not necessarily just doing the traditional black and white, because that can be really abrasive.
Right.
When you have like all
these... choosing like muted matte tones. Right.
You don't want to select like really obvious colors. You want that to kind of match. So yeah, that's kind of like the basics for choosing a color palette. Your accent with a complementary, and then a neutral, and then you have your black or your dark and your light. I think it's just really important just to kind of sum this up, that color is powerful.
Right.
And if you look around, it's pretty remarkable just to observe the different kinds of industries and brands and businesses, like on your drive or on social media, and see what do you see businesses having in common, right? Like if you look at wellness industries, they are using like neutral tones, greens, etc. If you look at like, Mercedes and Rolex, right? They're using like blacks and whites and metals. So there is a science to it. There's a reason why McDonald's uses red and orange, because neurologically we do respond to color. So it's important to think of, how do you want to make your client feel? Do you want them to feel enlivened and excited? Then use some like yellows and oranges, right? If you want them to feel like they can trust you and that you are someone that they can go to and feel comfortable with, maybe use some like blue tones. So kind of using that to your strengths so that everything in your brand is on brand.
It's so interesting, just going back to like the first mistake that we talked about, because I really don't feel like many people think about what they want their audience to experience based on the colors. Like I think it's again about what they like or what they feel like will work with them. But this is obviously what we talk about with branding. Like we're talking about a whole experience, a whole brand planning, brand strategy, and everything is curated for your brand. Everything. And like I know that people think about like colors and logo with that. I think that's what people typically think of when they think of branding. But it's the whole thing. Like everything needs to function together for the experience that you want to give your client.
Totally.
It's based on your client experience.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that people can get, stuck on that a little bit, and it's hard to imagine what your client will want, but that's the whole point of like doing brand identity and figuring out what's your vision, mission, who's your ideal client, like paint the picture very vividly and clearly so that you can really get it. So I feel like for someone who's trying to start this stuff on their own, resources like Pinterest are invaluable. I mean, you can just go to Pinterest and there's literally, thousands, hundreds of thousands of palettes that you can look through. So,
and you can really just choose those.
Yes.
If those are the ones you like. And if you feel overwhelmed by choice. I know something that was so helpful for us. I mean, we obviously had you to do all of this for us, but when you and I first got started in our selection, you told me to use Pinterest and just to pin images that I resonated with. So I wasn't pinning palettes. I wasn't pinning colors or anything. I was just choosing things that for some reason resonated with me. And you did the same. And then we kind of like went through and talked about those things. And obviously we had already done our brand strategy beforehand, so we knew what we were doing in regards to our audience experience. But you ended up choosing like hex code colors, right? Was that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
Like extracting the colors on the images that we ended up deciding on together. And that's like, isn't that how we ultimately came up with like the base of our palette?
Yeah.
So I feel like for me, that was really helpful going through those images. So whether or not like people are doing this on their own right now, or if they're working with a designer trying to figure things out, I just feel like starting with things that resonate with you and for whatever reason is really powerful. And then thinking if they fit in with your branding.
Absolutely. There's something about that like intuitive part of your process. It's like, your brand, your business almost like, your child, like there's the ins and outs of it, the intricacies that only you understand. And so there is power in just like, okay, I'm just going to go with the flow, like go peruse through Pinterest and like, for some reason this reaches out to me, and then when you're done looking through your board and seeing everything you've collected, and I think it's first of all really insightful, to see like, what am I actually, it might illuminate some things that maybe you would not necessarily notice about your brand, right? You're looking like, oh my gosh, there's like a common theme here, like I like, whatever it might be, like there might be some things that come to light that you wouldn't ordinarily know. And then pulling a color palette from that is just more authentic then, right? Like it's not so much. Are you playing fancy?
I know. I was like,
I know.
And you're weird about feet
hate
things.
feet. I know.
Claire's
I hate
weird
feet.
about
I'm
feet
sorry.
things.
Yeah.
And I know I touched her foot by accident. And I was like, crap. This is going to derail
I was going to move on like normal, but I saw your smirk and I couldn't handle it. Yeah.
Shoot.
I'm sorry, I hate feet. Okay.
That's okay.
They gross me out. Anywho. So color palette.
Yes.
Yeah, so moral of the story, color palette is, there's so much more to it, and there's so much power behind it, and take advantage of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. So if you want to find out more, you guys can head to our website, animela.com. We'll have a blog post that you can dive into to, see all of this in front of you so you can kind of lay it out and play with it and how to put a color palette together for your business. You can check us out on Pinterest, on TikTok, Instagram. What else do we have? YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're everywhere. Come see us.
Bye.
See you next time.